Welcome to Why Live Today. I'm Brett. This series is called Freedom from Addiction and Loneliness. Last time we talked about Odysseus and the Greek myth about the sirens and how he approached it so his crew could survive and he could survive. They had tied him to the mast. If you want to hear a fuller account of that, you can go back to the previous video. And I'd encourage you to do that because this story I'm about to talk about and this topic, a whole different approach to the same issue of addiction and loneliness. And if you have both, then you can compare and it'll make more sense. All that to say, stick with me here and I hope this will be helpful to you. So, for me, early on, I remember first few years of marriage, I was really struggling with the idea of my eyes and my mind and my heart and how they were just drawn away constantly to other women and other things. And I was trying so hard to control it and it just wasn't happening. And I remember being in Phoenix, Arizona with my wife in the car and I finally broke down. I broke down crying. And I just told her, I can't do it. I can't. I had lost in terms of my thoughts, my mind, my heart, my eyes. It just wasn't happening no matter how hard I tried with rules, boundaries, techniques. None of it was effective. And so I was coming to the end of myself. I had lost. And the truth is, I realized it and I knew it. If I didn't win this battle with just my thoughts, then the other things I was doing that weren't good either, and in my past, they would continue to happen. But the reality is, there is no thoughtless action. There is a thought and there is a heart behind every action. So no matter how much I rationalized it or tried to rationalize it away, the reality was, there was darkness, I couldn't escape it, and I kept losing the battle with darkness, even though I had these rules. The cutting off approach wasn't working, and the rules weren't helping. In fact, and maybe you can relate to this, they seem to be making it worse. Just the idea of don't touch the wet, white picket fence that's just been painted. And what's the first thing we want to do? We want to touch it, right? So there's a truth. And when I thought about the Bible and God and the 10 Commandments and all these things, my thought was, I need to keep these. But here's an interesting statement. Listen to this, the reality of why the law and rules were given by God. The law was brought in so that the trespass or sin might increase. But where sin increased, grace increased all the more. And we'll get to the grace part. That's the beautiful part and the freeing part that I'm going to talk about here in a moment. But the reality is the law was given by God so that we would find out how sinful we really are. In fact, it would even provoke ourselves, our hearts to sin even more. So the reality was we're in a losing battle here. And we need to know that we're losers without God. I wasn't the good person that I thought I was. I was depraved and I was messed up and overwhelmed. And I felt like, and this is the reality I discovered with all addiction and loneliness, it's so overwhelming. It feels impossible. And we want to quit. So I was facing reality and I was about to say,
I can't. It's too big.
Mole, I'm sorry, buddy. I forgot about you. Well, he has the hidden reference. And with the way I was at that time, realizing it was overwhelming and I wanted to quit, I needed someone to say this. And here's our Easter egg, our hidden reference.
You know, I can't help but notice you seem a little at war with yourself here.
I was finally getting to a place where I was willing to acknowledge the war and the defeat going on in my life. But what I didn't realize was I was that much closer to the solution. Losing on my own brought me closer to winning with God. I remember sharing the following truth from the Bible with a friend, and I remember his shock when he heard it. He just recoiled and was like, he actually started yelling on the phone when I shared it. And he was coming to terms with what I'm talking about right now, with what I was coming to terms with. So let me read that same quote to you. I want to do what is good, but I don't. I don't want to do what is wrong, but I do it anyway. Can you relate to that frustration of opposites and feeling trapped and defeated? Well, let's talk about a specific story that will address this defeat and a whole new way of approaching what we're talking about. In the last video, I talked about the idea of saying no. There's a place for boundaries and parameters. But now I want to talk about the other half of the story. And I have to have this other half to have victory and to exercise choice and in freedom. So think about addiction and loneliness as I share this Greek myth. Very similar to Odysseus and the Sirens, this is Jason and the Argonauts. So they're going to face the same obstacle, the Sirens, but Jason goes about it in a different way. He talks to Chiron, which is one of the best, wisest centaurs, who gives him a different solution to this problem of going through the siren-infested waters. He says, take Orpheus with you, one of the greatest musicians who was given a golden harp by the god of music, Apollo. And so he took Orpheus, they began to sail through the waters, and the sirens, who have this call that no person can resist, no man can resist, and they normally die or get crashed into the rocks, they begin to sail through the siren-infested waters, and instead of being tied to the mast like Odysseus, Jason tells Orpheus, hey, when you hear those sirens, you start up with your music. You start playing. So they're sailing through, the sirens start up, and then Orpheus begins to play. So as the sirens start, the crew moves to the edges of the boat. They're about to throw themselves to their death. And then Orpheus begins to play. Jason and the crew turn and are drawn into a huddle around Orpheus, just transfixed, locked in to the music of Orpheus. So they sail through the waters, they survive. No candle wax in the ears, no being strapped down to a mast. They were taken with better music. So again, the question is, why? Why did they survive? And then how did they survive? And it was with the better music. It wasn't just saying no, but it was saying yes to something better. And that's the key, the better music. That's the focus here. We need to say yes to something better. So we need to think about our addiction or that thing we struggle with, loneliness. We need to understand that there's really a deeper thing happening in our hearts, a cry that's happening for something beyond the things that this world offers. We need to realize that there is something that we deeply need and want, and it's not whatever that thing is. And I want to share another story, that one of my favorite examples from a movie of this same principle, and then we'll keep going. Check out this scene where Mozart is played in a horrible prison where there's very little hope, from Shawshank Redemption.
I have no idea to this day what those two Italian ladies were singing about. Truth is, I don't want to know. Some things are best left unsaid. I like to think they were singing about something so beautiful it can't be expressed in words, and makes your heart ache because of it. I tell you, those voices soared. higher and farther than anybody in a great place dares to dream. It was like some beautiful bird flapped into our drab little cage and made those walls dissolve away. And for the briefest of moments, every last man at Shawshank felt free.
Man, that's a good scene. So, the best music. Bottom line, it's the meaning of life for you and for me. The thing was, I called myself a Christian. I said I believed in Jesus. I really didn't know what that meant, and I didn't really know Jesus. And if I don't really know what I believe or the things that I had actually experienced in my Christian life, whether it was church or reading a Bible or going to some service project or event or whatever, that yes wasn't really enough for me at the time. There's something more that I was lacking or missing. So listen to this next story about the rich, young, godly ruler who is in a very similar place. "I've obeyed all these commandments," the young man replied to Jesus. "What else do I lack, or what else do I need to do?" He had everything the world would say you should have, but he knew something was missing, and that's how I felt. I was a good person. I did well in sports, in school, quote-unquote good person. But I knew that there's something deeply wrong with me, and that there was evil, and that there was a lack of control, and there was this emptiness. There was all these factors going on. I knew something wasn't right. I wanted something more, that better music. So listen to this quote by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. "The pursuit of purity is not about the suppression of lust, but it's about the reorientation of your life toward a larger goal." So let me give you an example with my son's permission, my son Daniel. He loves food, and my daughter Erin would also say she loves food too. At times they're eating machines, but I remember many years ago, my son Daniel always had to be eating, even in the morning. I got to eat something every hour, or I'm bored. I got to eat. And there was one day where I woke up, I was going about my day, got to lunchtime, and then I think maybe I came back home, and I talked to Daniel, and as I walked in the door of the house, I said, "Hey, what have you eaten today?" And he said, "Oh, nothing." I think he was a little surprised too. I was shocked. And I was like, "What?" And then I looked and paid a little more attention, and he was playing Minecraft, which is his favorite game, or was his favorite game at the time. And I realized, and I think he realized too, he was so into his game that he had forgotten to eat. And so that's a great example of the greater affection casting out the lesser affection. I mean, we can talk about how that can even be a problem, video games or other things, but the bottom line is the principle holds. The greater affection ultimately will assume the throne of your heart and will be predominant in your mind and take over. So on that idea, or with that idea in mind, I have some questions to pose. Don't try to go all through all the questions, just listen to them and then take one or two that you want to think about this week. Because for me, I still hadn't figured out that greater affection. I'm still figuring it out, but I've gotten a lot further along to where that greater affection really does cast out everything else for the most part. So that's really the direction I want to go in. I don't want to go too far down the tracks. Just think about this for yourself right now as I list off these questions. Ready? What is the big why of my life? Am I really living for that big why? Is my big why helping with addiction and loneliness? Number 4, what should the big why of my life be? We have to make a decision. How do I live for the big why? And we'll get there with the how part. That'll be a lot of what we do in the later videos. I placed these questions in the description as well as the other references, the Easter egg, hidden reference, and all that good stuff for you to check out. If this was helpful to you, go ahead, click the like button, subscribe, ring the bell for the notifications to receive updates of videos or new videos that I post. And I really appreciate you being here. Would love to hear any comments, any feedback you have. Until next time, this is Why Live Today.